Does Pete know we're upstairs?
Is there someone in there?
Natalie is downstairs still kind of watching for anyone.
Okay. Is she listening?
No.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Community Economic Development Committee, May 2nd. I'm going to do roll call.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson? Not yet. There he is.
Yes.
Oh,
Mr. Peterson?
Stay here.
Pete, we're doing roll call.
Pete Peterson.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Salazar?
Here.
Here you have a quorum.
Thank you. So let's go around. We got Ryan.
Ryan Yell, Planning Department.
Mandy Honest, Clerk's Office.
Steve Brasher, Great Northern Cannabis.
Jordan Huss, Great Northern Cannabis.
Phil Steyer, Chugach Electric.
All right, thank you. So today, pretty light agenda. Got Great Northern Cultivation Expansion. I'm going to start with that, Mandy.
Yep. So this is for a new cultivation license. All of the licensing restrictions were addressed in their operating plan. There weren't any taxes, fees, or fines found due by any of the licensees or affiliates. They addressed all of the safety and security requirements in their operating plan, and all of the cultivation-specific requirements were addressed as well. So there were no additional conditions recommended on the license.
All right, thank you. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Great Northern Cultivation is applying for a special land use permit for marijuana cultivation to total approximately 3,200 square feet of space within an existing 18,483 square foot industrial use building. The proposed facility is within an I-1 district generally located southeast of the intersection of Arctic Boulevard and West 70th Avenue. Planned hours of operation are Monday through Sunday, 24 hours a day. This operation will be built out in 2 phases. The first phase will only encompass the 3,200 square feet, but the petitioner has plans to expand the facility to a total of 12,302 square feet at a later date. Planning staff conducted analysis of the facility, assuming a full build-out, to confirm that there wouldn't be any land use impediments for the applicant in the future. However, only 3,200 square feet is to be licensed at this time. And I do have a possible amendment that may make this phase 2 a little easier on the applicant, and we can discuss that. The closest protected land use is in an athletic field, Papago Park, which is located approximately 1,540 feet away, as measured in accordance with the criteria of Anchorage Municipal Code. The site has obtained non-conforming rights for building encroachments present on property and the lack of visual enhancement landscaping. The underlying plat contains a note which restricts access to West 70th Avenue only. This note is addressed through Condition 6 of the Assembly Resolution. Use is consistent with the Anchorage 2040 Land Use Plan. The provided site plans do not show any major alterations to the building facade or structure that would make it of dissimilar character, scale, or size when compared to surrounding structures, and the Planning Department recommends approval subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Two things. One for the petitioner. You guys, is this the second facility, or you?
Actually, you can say
Yeah,
it.
sure.
Go ahead. So when you speak, give your name because we record this, so people should keep track.
So the question was, is this going to be a new location, or are you going to move your location? You already have one.
I'm Jordan Huss with Great Northern Cannabis. This is going to be a second facility, cultivation facility.
The first one is how big?
First one is 5,000 square foot total.
Okay, it's pretty compact.
Just make clear, you have a manufacturing here right now
Yes.
in location.
And then my second question that just comes up in the conversation we just had as you described this phase 1 and phase 2. So we're licensing phase 1. What happens if a protected use moves in between phase 1 and phase 2? Some church opens up within a mile or so, 1,000 feet. And how do we plan to work through that? Because I can now imagine a scenario where a person makes a massive investment and then gets blocked from achieving the full benefit of their commerce and their growth.
So, Mr. Chair, Ryan Yell. So this is a great question. My assumption would be that the licensed premises area could not be expanded if a protected land use moved in next door or within that 500 feet. However, if the approval were to acknowledge the full build out, but only approve phase 1 at this time and perhaps delegate approval of phase 2 to the planning director, that may be a good fix. And that would be in line with the way that AMCO handles phase developments.
So, in the context of this specific license, I'm not sure what we should do, but I think that I would ask you guys to put your heads together, Hal, and figure out what a way we can ensure if someone makes an investment, they have the opportunity to grow. Right? Just come back with some proposals on how we can manage that at a legislative level, what we need to do. And then that raises the question, what do we do with this license? But
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just because Chris raised this broader policy point, I've long expressed my dislike of a system that pits different private uses against each other and gives one private use sort of a trump card over another private use. I'm more comfortable with the idea of, like, if we were to build a school site near there and we made a large policy choice, and that is what it is. But like you said, if any church can move in and then no one else can use that area, and they're sort of, there's a concept in the law of moving to the nuisance, basically. They're sort of going to where they know the issue already exists, and then we are getting rid of any rights from this private business to expand. I'm not comfortable with that, but I'm curious if we have any ability to actually change that, or if that is your interpretation of what the state law is, because the state law sets out certain protected uses, right? So does the state law, is that what, would they not even be able to get the necessary state laws to do that, or state licenses or changes to do that? Or is it actually something we could potentially modify in our own code? There's something from Mandy too. Oh, sorry.
So it's not state. State has like some requirements, but it's more lax. They have further distances allowed. So we're the ones that kind of made it more restrictive. So it would be something we could do with ours.
So I'm going.
Oh, thank you. So Ryan Yell, but so the state has protected land uses for churches, childcare centers, and schools, and they do 500-foot shortest pedestrian route, and then we've honed in on the 200-foot straight line distance to protected land uses, 500-foot straight line to schools, and the 500-foot shortest practical pedestrian route. So we're much more restrictive in that. I think perhaps a larger discussion of maybe reevaluating the protected land uses and the appropriateness of them should potentially take place as part of this discussion. But if you're increasing the licensed premises area, you're increasing the potential impact that that facility might have on nearby businesses. So that's why it's my assumption that if we were to be faced with a situation that we would have to factor in that new protected land use moving in next door within 500 feet and say that that standard wouldn't be met in separation distance.
But again, that notion you just said, I think, so if they had a premise, and if they're, and as long as they're not moving to another lot, which would be a whole other issue, and perhaps if they're shifting the door, I guess that might be an issue. But in general, even if they're increasing the size of the facility, they haven't pushed out their distance any. It should still be sort of a radius. It's not quite a radius because of our pedestrian routes, but it's basically a radius of about 500 feet, or a tighter one within 200. And if someone else in the interim moves into that radius, I don't think it should further restrict that business. And I would be interested in us looking into that and just saying, like, that there are, it's not exactly grandfather rights, but basically if someone else is moving into an area that you've already established, then that shouldn't preclude you from doing further business. And sure.
Thanks.
Ryan, is that how it's handled with other protected uses? If there's a building that has a use and then a protected use moves in, they can't do any kind of modifications? Is that kind of current practice with other types of businesses?
I think you'd be like referencing like bars and restaurants and stuff, or like package stores.
Any place where like the minors, the administrative permits are required?
I'd have to check with, so Francis McLaughlin does the vast majority of all the alcohol permits. I can check with him to see how he handles that. But
I think part of it's a policy question too. I mean, the Assembly has the ability to, as part of this process, the Assembly has the ability to make those decisions and, put your reasonings on the record of why, that you're allowing something to happen based off of prior approvals. Or if it is a big impact, then the alternative, you'd have the ability to decline.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. The only thing I would toss in to be considered through that, particularly as we talk about churches and other protected uses, is it a rental or ownership moving in? I mean, I could see strategic rental of property, you know, for a purpose that isn't going to be maybe a permanent use or isn't contemplated as a permanent use as well, moving within that radius.
Well, absolutely.
As you're thinking about this and as we're analyzing this, I definitely want to look at that question of a rental versus ownership and other types of things like that. I think this is really a large issue that's going to have a lot of nuances.
Trust me, it does. It does. Pete?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm wondering, do we already know that there's a church that's thinking about moving into this neighborhood, or where did that information, how did that come about?
No, just I now can easily contemplate a scenario in which they've just invested 150 or 250 grand in a building and then another 200 grand in a process to make the business work with a plan where in 2 years they're going to capitalize on that investment by growing more, and then someone moves in and suddenly they can't. And so the uncertainty that we've added into the mix by some of these rules makes it a much more high-risk investment. And so I don't have any specific knowledge of this location, but I do know in the downtown there have been some churches that said, we're going there, right into that building, because we don't want anything legally licensed to be here. And so that has happened. And then the business leaves, and then the church leaves, and there's a hole where a neighborhood used to be.
Right.
So,
Well, but my original question was going to be, you're talking about expanding possibly to, you have what, 3,200 feet you're starting out, and it could go to 10,000 or something, or 12,000? Do you have enough electricity to in the building right now, or would you have to add more? Or?
When we go into phase 2, we'll have to do an electrical upgrade.
Because I saw Phil here, and I figured that's why he was here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, thank you.
So this is a good discussion. I think we might want to make this, do some investigating, look at it,
and
as a
I was
separate
in the queue
agenda item.
for one more question. And I think at our last meeting we had discussed phasing for the first time. And what I think we might want to do is, in the phasing conversation, come up with some theories on how land use would be impacted over the phasing, so that if they make their initial application with a series of phases in it, then those phases could be incorporated underneath the umbrella of the granted license, but only if they do so in such a way that it's thoughtfully approached and within the deliberations. And so in that way, if someone comes back and it hasn't been laid on the table in the previous conversation, we haven't thoroughly gone through it, then that might be subject to additional public process, right? And there also we had a discussion a little bit about how some of those decisions could be administrative once you get to a certain process. And so I think we're really starting to move into the conversation about what does that phasing of licensing facilities mean. And so they're part and parcel. But it still brings back to the question, what do we do with this license?
Ryan has a solution.
So I got a couple points. A lot of those extra code amendments that I had thrown into the draft on-site consumption AO that we then pulled out, I'm going to be putting those into a separate AO, and that's going to include some changes to the modification regulations. So I think that that'd be a very appropriate time to have this discussion when I have that ready for you, which should hopefully be in a few weeks here. I think with this particular case, it's unique in the fact that we are aware of the expansion now. With a lot of these other cases, they may have come in, and the next case on the agenda, Coal Creek Extracts, business is doing really well, so they're expanding into an adjoining unit, but they may not have anticipated that at the time of initial application. With this one, we know that, and we can evaluate this entire site based upon the full build-out. So I think, and Dean can correct me on the legalities of this, but if we were to add a condition that was a notwithstanding clause, basically talking about the modification regs as they stand today, that the approval for phase 2 could be delegated to the planning director with concurrence by the municipal clerk.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea for that AO. I think also, I believe it's already the case in our regulations that in fact I know it is, but I don't know where in the regulations it is, that if they had their site and a conflicting use like a church were to move in right next door, you don't have to shut down the marijuana facility. And so I would like to see an alteration, and perhaps you can put that in your AO that says something along the lines of moving into a site where a marijuana facility already exists, moving into that radius, both doesn't shut down the marijuana facility and doesn't prevent further licensing or expansion of the marijuana facility on that parcel, right? Because they've already established that parcel as a place where they can do this business. And I think that would resolve your concern. And if you could put some kind of draft like that in, and then we can have that debate when the AO comes back before us. I do think that if that exact set of circumstances happened, I think we'd have a really robust discussion about the fairness of it, and I suspect that that's where we'd actually land. So if we do it, you know, what's the legal term? Beforehand. Ex post.
No.
Anyway, whatever that term is in
all
Latin,
right.
it's fancy.
Latin back in
right.
school.
If we did it prior hoc or whatever it is, that would be better.
Speak English.
Yes. This is America, no Latin.
Dean?
Yeah, I'm not going to correct my own dog, but I just thought if you use some Latin standings and code provision language and improve your license, these are resolutions, and you can't do that by resolution to supersede code. I mean, for the body that makes the law, but you have to make exceptions to current code by wordings. And I guess you could just change this AO to an AO with the same, but notwithstanding this section. So that's one point. I guess the second point, you would definitely want to have robust discussion, looking at, I guess, this whole issue for the record, so we have a good record going forward. And I would just say, I understand it's a policy decision, but there's legal protections, right, for protected uses, and they would have standing, it's, I guess, a right thing for litigation, and maybe you get a Department of Law to look at the issue and see if they can. There's litigation risk, I guess, from protected use that is now becoming within separation distance with phase and expansion takes place. I mean, I think you would stand a challenge. You've got litigation risk there. You also have immunity, liability for the city for granting a permit to just whether they have the right to do it or not.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, but I still think we should explore going down the road that Mr. Dunbar proposed. And I think what it is simply adding one of the findings in there in one of the sections, I'm not sure where, that we recognize that this use is intended to expand. And at this time, we grant the authority to operate under the current conditions, and that we I don't know exactly how to say it. Going forward, we recognize that this use is intended for this place at this time, even up to the 3,000 or 10,000 feet. And so,
Ryan may have already.
yeah,
So
but if we can add that kind of clause inside of the resolution as it comes forward, then at least it's established on the record at this time that that was part of the conversation and it's meaningfully addressed.
Okay.
Did you have wording ready, or you just conceptually have?
Kind of, yeah, conceptually thinking about it. I guess if we got rid of the notwithstanding and just delegated phase 2 approval to the director, is that okay in a resolution, or does it have to be in an AO?
See, you're thinking about it in the context of delegation of authority, but I'm thinking about it just making a finding on the record now that the use is approved to 10,000 feet with their application if it's approved. So I guess it could be through the director, but I want to hone more to the idea of the use, not the delegation of authority, right?
Okay. I guess where I'm going with that is just because for phase 2 they'll have to come back to the assembly for full approval, to whereas if there was some type of delegation of powers to the administrative level, then phase 2 could be handled administratively. And that's kind of where I'm thinking, since we know about this now, it'd be easier on the applicant to go that route. But if we just acknowledge it in the AR, that may not get them fully there. I mean, because we would know that it would be be coming, but it would still have to go before you again.
Can I jump to Mandy real quick?
So one of the things that might help in this situation, the state is working on their phasing, and so we kind of talked about this before, that they submit multiple plans to the state for their applications, and the full packet with what they fully intend as their ultimate goal for the building is what the ABC board sees and approves, even if they're only acting on a certain portion of that. And so I would think eventually we're going to want to maybe try and mirror that as we've done with other integrations of the state regulations. And I think that that would help, because then you guys would be seeing the full thing and approving the full thing,
Right.
but only the active part was what would be operated. But you would have already approved for the full plan. So therefore, they could do those expansions, and it would have already been approved. And so if something moves in before they're able to do those extra phases, that's already been approved. And so they kind of, I mean, that would kind of catch the grandfather, because, so
When do you
that
expect
might,
that?
I can look into it. I don't know right now what they're already requiring you guys to do the full phases, right? So was that something that they did with code change, or was it just application requirement changes?
I'm not 100% sure. This is
I'll
Steve
look into
Brashear with Great Northern Cultivation. I'm not 100% sure of that. John Redden has been handling a lot of that application work for us. So.
I'll look into it, and it may be something that we want to maybe either codify, or it might just be a policy if they just did it as part of their procedures.
Do you think like in the next month or 2 months?
You could probably do it pretty quick. I
Okay,
think.
because that little extra one for the small tweaks is coming up. I mean, that can be ready in a week or two.
Yeah.
But there's nothing there that's real pressing, so we could kind of get some more information and revisit this in a future meeting. So, okay, let me go, Meg.
Yes, thank you. I like the idea of the delegation of powers with the phasing, Ryan. The one thing I would want to be clear on is what things that the administrative delegation looks at would kick it back out to the public process. I would want to be really clear. If certain things were pinged as the expansion goes forward, we kick it back out for public comment, because some of these phasings could take many years. So I want to be, there will be times where a neighborhood could change significantly, or there could be issues with the operation. I mean, there just could be things where we would want to bring it back out to the public process. But I think it's fantastic to be able to give a business some certainty to work toward the phasing, and not have it up in the air, but with that secondary protection that we aren't excluding the public when certain things occur.
Crystal?
Well, that was my concern, is the whole public process piece. And, I think I kind of like Chris's idea more about, let's just be transparent from the very beginning and figure out what the whole intent of the facility is. And then at that point, you absolutely have your public process going on. I'm a little more concerned about the idea of having administrative delegation, because I think there's potential there for losing that really key component. Because my understanding is the state doesn't have any kind of public process in licensing permitting process. Is that correct? That's
So
all strictly administrative regulation.
They do have noticing periods. They do accept public comments, and then those comments are submitted before the ABC board at their quarterly meetings, and those are public meetings, so they do allow the public to go and speak on
But the
those.
majority of the responsibility really lies right here at the local level for public process. So I want to make sure we protect that.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. So I heard you, Mandy, say that the state requires the full plan up front, and then I heard the applicant say that they in fact provided that to the state.
Mhm.
And so are we then considering this is the whole plan before us, except only a small part to be operated? So we effectively have before us the entire phased plan, right? And so from a functional perspective, we could adopt today, or not today, but at our meeting on Tuesday. Yeah, well, okay, Brandon has a question. Can we, based on the materials we have before us today, going before the assembly when it gets there, have it adopted based on the 10,000 square foot model, 12,000 square foot model? Then we have that opportunity for the public process. And in the specific case, not in a general way in every time, but in this specific case, delegate the authority because we have already seen the plan. And then we address the process in a more global way going forward, the issue of phasing, what our standards, what the methods are that protect the public interest and at the same time provide for certainty. I think we could get there. So if the applicants agree and if everyone else agrees that the full plan is here, why don't we approach it from that way, or can we? Is there any reason we can't?
Mr. Chair, I don't think there's any reason we can't. I think we can definitely acknowledge the full build-out. That's how this application's been evaluated. So I think that makes sense logically to just acknowledge the full build-out, but then recognize that it's going to be done in 2 phases.
And that can come back for administrative review, but only based on the fact that it has already been here in the 12,000 square foot model. So that doesn't open the door for someone who owns a big building but didn't give us this conversation to then say, well, we're expanding and it's just up to the director, right? Okay, that seems reasonable.
Can I jump to Dean real quick? Say, Dean, is that?
Well, I sort of wonder 2 things. Is if you delegate the authority to approve that later modification and expansion in the later phase and protect the public process. Part of the public process is a public hearing for the assembly, so I'm not sure how we delegate to the planning director and still have hearing from the assembly here. That's very close. So, and normally you would have one without, I guess, modification. It's a major modification. So just want to should think about. I think we can figure it out, but I want to make sure we acknowledge the issues and proceed with this way. And I guess the other thing I wondered, if you have a build-out plan and you have later phases, the additional, I guess, later expansion, I guess you might have a site plan, but if they have doors added later without expansion, part of the separation distance is measured for the entrance. So you need to have, I guess, all the entrances in the initial submitted plan. You don't have a full interior design of that. If you could do that, then I don't see a problem with your site.
I think the question from Chris, though, is can we, instead of approving a 3,200 foot cultivation, just jump ahead now and approve a 12,302 square foot cultivation based on what we've done today and based on this packet? And I think this packet, the drawings show the build out in here. So can we switch and make it?
I think that shows where the entrances are as well. After the expansion, sure, probably just like what I was talking about.
So can we do that on Tuesday? Is somehow?
I have a factual question related to that. I think that's important.
Okay, well, let's see. I mean, did you measure the separation distances based on doorways shown in this, all the doorways and so on?
Yes.
Okay, so that's met. Okay.
Yes.
What was noticed, though? That's my concern.
Yeah.
Did we notice a 3,200 square foot facility, or did we notice a eventually 12,000 square foot facility? Because if we only notice 3,200 square feet, then I think we might be running into a problem.
And that problem can be fixed by delaying 2 weeks and renoticing.
I just want to be clear on that.
You know, I think it would be wise on their part to delay in the short term to ensure they have the right to open in the long term. Huh?
21 days.
It would be up to them, but the risk is high.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So specific to the noticing requirements, when we send out the notices, it just says marijuana cultivation facility. But on the application that's noticed on, which they're actually not advertised online anymore, specific to marijuana, people have to come down to the office and get the physical file if they want to take a look at it. But on the application, it would state 3,200 square feet.
It's a question. When you went to the community councils, did you talk about your phase 1 and phase 2?
Yeah, I spoke at the community council and I referenced the entire operation that we had planned for that building, not just the specific build-outs. And everyone was in agreement with that.
Okay, and you got an MOU, right?
What's that?
You got an MOU with the community council, which isn't really required for cultivation, but and was it based on the?
It was based on the entire facility.
Did he express that? I mean, it was in here. I didn't flip it, but did he expressly say square footage, or did he just say we're okay?
I don't recall if he clarified square footage, and I think at that point we had established a plan to do a multi-phase build-out, and they understood the intention. They also understood that the overall goal was to build out the entire facility.
this drawing too, or this diagram was also provided in a hard copy of the presentation to everybody that attended. And I believe you met twice with the committee council on this project.
So just, sorry to jump you guys, but why didn't you just come to us for the whole thing? I mean, it's like, apparently you're fairly well poised to do this bigger.
Yeah, it was just the state, I think, that started driving this process for us. We kind of, got caught up in this phased approach with the state, and then we provide copies of our application to the municipality, and so we ended up sort of almost by default following the same path with you. I think in hindsight, if we had realized that we could present this as one project, instead of even talking about phased approaches, that would have been our preference. We would have done that. But as Jordan described, fortunately, we did discuss the project as a whole to the community council, and they got a copy of the diagram. There's really no new, I can't think of any new entrances or exits to the building or anything like that. This is just a modification of the interior. We're adding walls and creating rooms within a building. But yeah, we started down this road with the intent to just permit the whole thing with the state under one application. But then when the state realized we wanted to construct in 2 phases, that sort of changed the trajectory, which led us to where we are today with the municipality. And I might add that the reason for this phased approach, that might be the next question, why don't you just build it all at once? There were 2 reasons. One was timing. We wanted to use this smaller footprint sooner because we're going to use it for packaging and trimming operations. And we have sort of a constriction or a bottleneck in our production process over the cultivation facility at Cinnabar Loop, so we could then bring product from there to here. We'd have the equipment, the staff, a lot more space to work in, and we can process it, we can trim it, package it, and get it ready for sale in the retail store. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to do that. So timing was number one. The second reason was, of course, cash flow management. When we build the second phase of this, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar investment. So it probably costs somewhere between $3 and $5 million because of the HVAC, the lighting, and so forth. So we wanted to try to do this in a more controlled fashion. It also takes longer to build that second part, right? It's probably, I would guess it's probably an 8-month to a year project between the permitting, the building permits, and the construction and all of that kind of things. So those were the 2 reasons for taking this in a phased approach.
Okay, thanks. I got Forrest.
Yeah, so I had 2 questions. One was on notice, which I think has been answered to my satisfaction. The other was on the state license, and it strikes me as kind of illogical that they had you do that, unless you were getting 2 different kinds of licenses, a manufacturing and a cultivation. Then I understand, and we do that all the time with different kinds of licenses. But if it's all one big cultivation facility, why should the state and municipality particularly care if you build, once we've licensed it, why should we care if you build this portion in 6 months and this portion in 2 years? That seems like a level of micromanagement on a business that I just don't think we should engage in, if we're comfortable with the full build out at the end, which it seems like we are. So my question is, the state license, so we can do it whatever we're doing here, but the way they're doing this, are you going to have to go back to the state at some point?
We are going to have to go back to the state. And it's interesting because really we'll be submitting almost the exact same application with a slight modification to the operating plan, which will describe the utilization of this space, as well as an updated premises diagram.
Yeah.
That's it.
Even though it's all within one cultivation.
Yeah, it'll actually be the same license number.
I just don't really understand why the state did this. I wish Jed was here.
Does it save you from going to the board? You have to go and visit. My understanding was that it was an administrative approval for those secondary ones, since the board already approved the full thing.
Well, it might be the delegation of authority. Yeah. That would be, their action would be delegation.
So that was my understanding.
But again, all of this sort of points to Chris's idea of, if we were to, I think the notice has already been done. And if we were to just say, okay, we're going to approve the full 12,000, then we can sort of be done with it, and you can go back to the state when you need to or if you need to. So we've already got
I got Chris. Or you want to go with Dean?
Yeah, just a lot of this is an interesting conversation, but we really, other than smell, haven't had any problems with, I guess, one operator having stuff outside of their building. with the cultivators, and I guess our biggest problem has been with cultivators, not retailers. But the issue that brings people the biggest concern is the flow of the products in and out of a retail environment. And so some of these questions might be different for retail operations if they want to do a massive expansion. And so we, in our conversations, may want to look closely at the kind of the different uses that we're proposing and those processes that might be required.
Okay, let's focus on this license, and then I think we'll have a separate discussion on this phasing issue for all that. So I think right now we want to look, okay, the general view here, and then also do we want to expand it to 10,000? Those kinds of things I think takes it bigger. 12,000, we'll do a separate view. We'll get some legal review. Dean?
Well, I sort of have a question for Ryan related to notice, and if we're talking about a phase to build out that at least shows the interest if we improve it initially. I wondered if the zoning, zoning action, the second condition is required to be recorded with the state recorder's office. That's what exactly is recorded. Is it all, is that the whole application, right? Is it the resolution and something else? Is that at least the plan, the site plan is recorded? If that's in the recorder's office, I think that really solves those two people coming to the uses, protected uses at the church. And maybe you're allowed to, it's already been in the record, the state recorder's office.
So through the chair, the NZA, the Notice of Zoning Action, is a rather short document. It's just one cover page that states what the zoning action was. In this case, it'd be approval for a marijuana cultivation facility, and then the assembly resolution is attached to that. Just the first, 2 or 3 pages of it that just has the signature. It's not the full.
First to it by number, number 19, so.
Correct. Yep.
I think that's.
And inside of that, if it had a 10,000 foot or 12,000 foot number, wouldn't that suffice in the record, the zoning action, if it actually included a clause in there that said we recognize this facility may grow to X?
I think so, through the chair. And I'd also throw out too, Dean had mentioned maybe changing the AR to an AO, and we have done that in the past for a marijuana facility, and I'm relying on my memory here, but I think this was in 2016. I think it was Fuzzy Buds. I think they're now Fuzzy Monkey, but this was when we had a discrepancy between processing, because the state was only processing cultivation facilities, but they had come in, got approval for cultivation, now they wanted to retail, but the state wasn't processing retail applications, and you needed to have an attached and co-located retail facility in order to have cultivation in the B3. So we changed it to an AO to allow them to go forward and get approval from the assembly, pending state approval. So a little different situation, but kind of related. And I think that if we were to switch the AR to an AO, if that's necessary in order so that the powers that be are happy, that wouldn't necessarily be out of the ordinary or a stretch.
All right, thanks. So Dean, what does it take to switch this from an AR to an AO?
Change the letter R to an O. But basically the process is different as well. You've got to do that introduce, and then at least some days before you have to do that later meeting. It's just more time. It's more time for the applicants to wait for us to do it. It's more notice.
Okay, so looking at you guys, if there's a delay, I mean, we could just go through like it is, do the 3,200 like we have, and then you just come back with the phase 2, which is kind of our normal routine at this point. Or we could try to go through something and approve it at 10,000, maybe make an AO, which delays it several weeks. Do you have a preference?
So it'd be potentially 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or
Well, we could lay it on the table for Tuesday, and 2 weeks after that, I guess, have it come to us. So, assuming we don't have to do more with the community council, and it sounds realistically, community council has seen your full expansion.
Yes. Yeah.
But we do want to make sure that they're comfortable with that. At least give the chair a call. But
John.
is that 2 or 3 week delay initially?
I think we'd be comfortable giving more time towards this to get the full thing approved.
And then once you're done, then you have to go back to the state, but once that's done, you're already approved for the big one here,
Right.
and that could be 6, 7, 8, 9 months later.
Right.
If it's done. So your preferred route, if it can be within a few weeks, is to go ahead and do the whole
Yes.
phase thing. I mean, now it's possible we could do it just Tuesday,
And that'd be
based on this, if we finesse some kind of delegation. Okay. Chris?
Not late on the table, if we could do it tomorrow's Friday at noon.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
Right, it's better than laying on the table. So if we could do it by noon tomorrow, if not, then if we can proceed with what we have, fine, or come up with a better plan, but let's not lay it on the table.
Right, no, I understand.
Okay.
Meg?
2 things. One, the resolution passed by the Community Council seems to be their standard resolution with regard to marijuana facilities, and it's fairly broad. And so it's Taku Campbell, and they do this a lot. Second, I would like, if we're going to put a square footage language in the resolution, to have not to exceed language, not to exceed 12,000 square foot. I think that allows flexibility should there be a cash flow or other issue where their second phase ends up coming in a little bit less than the entire building, so that we're not right back here doing this thing again. Because I could see there could be unforeseen circumstances like an earthquake or something that changes the situation.
Okay, thanks. Amanda?
So, question kind of for Dean and Ryan. If there was a, maybe a floor amendment made to the AR that stated something to the effect that the approval was for the entire square footage proposed or not to exceed, could that work and not have to go through the AO?
You need to, I guess, the full build out. Is that already in there?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so.
I would agree that that could be done, because the only place that the phased build out is mentioned is in the application and in the staff report. So it's not mentioned really in the AR. So it would just be, adding a line in the AR stating the square footage of the full build out, so that that's on record. I'm also thinking too, making sure that we're not approving space that the state hasn't approved or will be approving, that we're not overstepping on this. So maybe subject to the approval of an MJ14, which is the state's license premise diagram change form.
One other subject too, I understand Meg's proposal not to exceed, but I would offer, let's put in there not to exceed without further approval, without further public process, so that it could exceed if they came back, right? So give them to that line, and then if they say it's 15 is the actual number we need now, they have to then go through the process for that additional 3,000.
Just for me, there is a certain amount of expansion. They can grow 10% or something like that, and not come back to us. We can just go to Mandy and Ryan. But there's a trigger where certainly this, if it were not noticed now, they come. That triggers the review by us.
I thought it was 20%.
Something like 20%.
But my only concern, I mean, if we have full plans up to a certain square footage, I guess, then that leaves lots of space within that, more than maybe 20% over 3,200 to up to that point, and then beyond that, then obviously we wouldn't have plans. So I think we would need to trigger a review of some sort.
Okay, Dean?
Or I mean, even if we do a floor amendment, like those conditions, like we mentioned, is it always sufficiently noticed for the full 12,000 square feet? And some community councils which have got that whole area noticed.
Yeah, so the everything has been properly noticed in a rather vague way, where it just says marijuana cultivation facility. The only place where the square footage is specified is in the application and in the staff report, which aren't included in the notices that get mailed out. nor is it included on the published notice on the municipal website. So the only time that a member of the public would be aware of the exact square footage would be if they were to actually read the application, which they would have to come down to the planning department and request, since we don't post those online anymore.
But as far as your typical noticing, you've done what you needed to do, and it wouldn't be any different than any.
Correct. Yeah.
And so just for the record, has anyone come in and requested to view this application?
We have not had any requests from the public to view this application.
Okay, so there isn't anyone who has been informed at this time of the square footage, other than the people who the applicants have told themselves at public meetings?
Correct. Nor have we gotten any public comments on this case either. So.
Okay. So, might be, I guess this is our main issue. So, based on this, you'll write something up, I mean, to pursue. So, rather than going the AO route, if we can, as you write something, saying, you know, realistically, public notice was out for cultivation of any size. We have presented to us all the information for the full build-out. We've evaluated it for the full build-out. Your conditions that you're proposing would apply to the full build-out, be both phases. And so you'll have something ready for us, hopefully tomorrow for the addendum, I guess, that would state that. We can chew on that on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think that you got to add on there and you're right about this, that for any expansion, then the authority is delegated. And in this specific case.
Well, if we do it not to exceed, then they have to come back to you, right?
But we want them to. When they're going to do their building plans and all the other plans, we don't want to grant just an open door. We want to eliminate barriers.
I don't know if I'm good.
Yeah, they would still have to go to you to adjust their operating area because they've been approved for full, but they're only operating out of it. So, but like the state does it, it's just administrative at that point.
So
And
we
then
just
we
have
need
that
another
raised.
inspection too,
Yeah.
just to verify security and that the plans match what's built on site.
So I guess from the licensing side, they'd be done, but from yours, the operating plan then, and you have to check that AMCO approved the second phase. So there are a couple little steps. So that would be, and the list of conditions would grow, right? So you propose new conditions, and one condition would be for phase 2 that they got the AMCO approval, that they got other permits for the build out and so on. And that's actually pretty standard though, as far as the approval from fire and so on, building.
I can make sure that we have a condition, hopefully just one extra condition that addresses all of this. And it may just be an acknowledgement in the appropriate section of the AR, probably section 3 of the AR, that acknowledges the full build out, because that's the one that's specific to the special land use permit. And then adding a condition along the lines of obtaining state approval for phase 2, and then we could then give the planning director could give approval for phase 2.
Okay, can you have that done before
Noon tomorrow?
Before noon tomorrow?
Have another section that just says that.
I can do it before tomorrow.
Can you get it soon enough to send it to Dean real quick before noon tomorrow?
Yeah.
So you can send it to Dean and review, and then I don't know who submits these.
It already has.
Yeah, so it's been in PACE. Any additional materials would need to go through PACE, but I can foresee this as an amendment to the existing materials. I don't think we'd need an additional document, so I think we should be good in terms of timing.
We'd like to have everything out
Not
as
for
early as
amendment.
possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not for an amendment.
Yeah, but we don't put amendments on the agenda.
Oh, you don't?
I guess, we put an S version there, S version on the addendum on the agenda. We'll put amendment 1, but I guess nothing for instance, like an argument here on the link saying we're going to amend this on Tuesday, including this, put that on the addendum.
Okay.
I guess that would work. We've got some more comments.
Yeah.
We figure this out, but I think we can do it.
I think it would be better to not do an S version, just because that triggers some new requirements for our own process. If we can do it, but also get it out there so people have a chance to read it early in advance, right? So that's the workaround hopefully you got.
And if we do an AM, we could kind of capture this discussion about it and say, it would be helpful too for the public to have the AM that kind of summarize this discussion and why this amendment is happening. So that's a good idea.
We can expand it on and have no resistance session, so forth, and then can be attached for review to that.
Okay, are people comfortable with that, going that route? And then we can, so we're not committed to it, but we have some good solid amendment to discuss on Tuesday. And then if that could go to Ron Jordan as well. Can you send that to Ron Jordan? The
Sure.
amendment? Just make sure, that he's got that covered a little bit. Any comments on that?
It's Ron Jordan, Council.
He's the chair.
I would recommend you reach out to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. And then we'll have a discussion later to look more broadly on how to handle these. Try to tie. It doesn't have. It'd be nice if it was tied in with that other ordinance coming forward. So what other? So and the parking you evaluated matches the full both phases.
Correct.
Okay. There was this access to Arctic. Is that an issue?
I think that's been resolved. That was, as I recall, there was a note on the original plat. Are you familiar with this, Ryan?
Correct.
And they had to go through some process through a board. I'm not real knowledgeable on the process, but our architect, Marina Comcove, with Asphalt Architecture, handled that. There was a civil engineer involved, and basically these notes were handwritten on the plat, and they had to be removed. And that was concerning this access from Arctic. And my understanding is that has been approved. That those notes are able to be removed from the plat. So I think to answer your question in simplistic terms, I think it's resolved.
Okay, so you removed, the way you dealt with it is removing the plat note, not changing your.
Correct, there's no change to access.
It's okay. Anything else on this?
Just one thing, just from what you just said, I just would put it also into the record that the parking plan, you asked the question, was it developed on the 12,000 square foot? And it was, according to the licensee. And so that's more evidence to the fact that we are contemplating the license for the whole built-out facility. Even our planning department has done the work to that end. And so it's already built into the plan functionally, not just conceptually.
Yeah, it's pretty clear in here.
Yeah.
They make crystal clear they evaluated it.
So that's just more evidence towards the finding that what we're doing is within the reasonable approach.
Okay. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how many parking spaces do they need for a 12,000 square foot cultivation facility versus a 3,200 square foot?
One per 1,000.
One per 1,000?
So they need 20 spots for everything.
For the on-site consumption.
Tucked in there.
They need 1,200 spots.
Sorry, Phil?
For the record, this is Phil Steyer from Chugach. Interestingly enough, regarding the electrical requirement, I believe your engineer, when they came to us, worked from the full requirement, and that's what that's what your condition is based upon, the need to resolve with Chugach, the electrical service. As a practical matter, I believe they're planning to work within their existing electrical service for phase one. So as I sit here, it dawned on me, you have in what started out as the phase one approval, you actually have a condition that doesn't apply to phase one, it applies to phase two, because that's what was identified to us was the full build-out. So there's no need to amend that particular condition if you're looking at full build-out, because what you have in there is accurate.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to go back to the parking, just to clarify, they need 20 parking spaces and they're providing 20 parking spaces. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so do we want to do a recommendation on this? We often do, or we?
Yeah, it's a good operation. The recommendation is that with the proposed amendment, that we approve this license.
Well, I think we can make a recommendation just to approve the license and then have the debate on the amendment.
At the 32.
Okay, that's
on
fine.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that would be my recommendation.
So you made a motion to approve it, that we recommend approval.
Yep.
For the 3,200, and then we'll discussed it, or you second that?
That's my, yeah.
Mine would be that we recommend it for the 10,000 that requires, 12,000 that requires the amendment, and then that's the conversation that we have with the full body. I would prefer us not to put forward a hesitant.
Well, I don't think the amendment needs to come from the.
No, and that's fine. We don't even have to speak about that. But what we can do is make a motion, which I think I did, for the full 12,000 foot. And you can skip any conversation about the amendment. That will be required to get there.
Sure.
But I just don't think we want to be hesitant in our conversation.
Well, I just don't want a situation where it's interpreted that we've recommended the 12,000, the amendment fails, and then it's not clear that we do also support the smaller, the actual licenses before the committee.
So then could it be a motion that would be forward the license for approval at to be determined?
You say phase 1 and phase 2. Recommend approval of phase 1 and phase 2. If phase 2
Yeah.
gets shot down, we still got approval for phase
Okay.
1.
Yes, that's good.
So you recommend, your motion is recommend approval for phase 1 and phase 2. Can you second that? Any opposition to that? Okay, so we'll present that information on Tuesday. Okay, good. Well, this is interesting discussion for some that seem fairly simple. So what did you learn? Come forward with the whole thing next time, no matter what changes. So, okay. Well, thank you.
Don't listen to
Thank
Steve.
you. Good luck. Okay, so B is Cold Creek extracts. Do we have paperwork on
Yeah,
this?
we have done those phased before, but it's always been like, okay, we're doing a cultivation, then we're doing a manufacturing, then we're going to do something, and they're going to come back. Yeah, with different licenses.
That's very licensing.
Right. But I remember we had the discussion about, early on, about, like, I might approve this, but I remember Amy thinking, I'm hesitant about the whole vision here,
Do we have paperwork on this?
I never got it, yeah. You didn't send it to me.
Okay, that's my fault, my bad. I guess we.
Do we want to take an at ease and can we print out some version of it? Not the whole packet, but can we get some smaller version of it? Or?
I guess for timeliness sake, I could pass this back around.
Well, here, why don't you go through, do you have licensing issues here?
So this is only a land use modification, so there's no
Oh, okay.
changes to the license. Do you want me to run and make copies of that?
Yeah. That should suffice.
Okay,
So-
Ryan, give us a lowdown. Oh, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Cade Ensko, own the Cold Creek Extracts.
What's
So,
your first name?
Cade.
Cold Creek Extracts is applying for a modification of their special land use permit for a marijuana manufacturing facility. The proposed modification will expand the manufacturing license premises to a total area of 1,725 square feet by expanding into an adjoining unit. This is an increase in area of 805 square feet, which is an 87.5% increase as compared to the existing size of the licensed premises, which is 920 square feet. Cold Creek Extracts was originally approved by the Assembly on July 31st, 2018, through Assembly Resolution 2018-2019, or 219, for 920 square feet of licensed manufacturing space. They are currently utilizing CO2 extraction methods as well as rosin press and ice water baths. The site is located southeast of the intersection at East 77th Avenue and Shum Street. Daily hours of operation are Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And as of this writing, there haven't been any municipal violations. The planning department recommends approval of the modification subject to the conditions as stated in the staff report. And Mandy's making copies of the applicable materials, but essentially what is occurring here is there's a light industrial sort of strip mall-ish building, and he's located in one unit, and he's going to be tearing down a wall or expanding the doorway and expanding into the next unit.
So a couple of questions. First, I'm sorry, you said that a little bit quickly. Is this manufacturing or cultivation?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing, okay. So it's a small cultivation facility, but quite a large manufacturing facility.
No cultivation at all.
Right.
It's all.
I'm just saying it would be. And could you say again where exactly it is?
It's Near King Street and Diamond, so
Oh,
it's
part of that.
southeast of the intersection of East 77th and Shun Street.
Part of what we are colloquially calling the Green Mile.
Green Mile, yeah.
And when you move into another unit like that, I remember we've had a lot of discussions about when you do the distances, it's lot line to lot line or it's door to door.
It depends on what the protected land use is.
Okay.
So there's the 200-foot lot line to any protected land use. So that's lot line to lot line. Then there's lot line to lot line for schools, and then it could be lot line to main entrance, or it could be main entrance to main entrance, or it could be main entrance to the edge of a athletic field.
Yeah.
It just depends what the protected land use is. But
Sure. It's a Kafka's nightmare of regulations. But in this case, I mean, the reason they're all there, right, is because there's nothing even remotely close. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very industrial area.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Great.
Just for the newcomers, a lot of talk and discussion went into those very unusual Kafkaesque regulations. We
Maybe not
tamper
nightmare, right?
Tamper with them at our peril.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
I should have said Byzantine instead of Kafka's. Sorry.
A lot of discussion went into creating those regulations.
Well,
I'll tell you
and I
that.
would offer that we have, one at a time,
Yes.
where reasonable, we have applied a better standard. And so there's not been a wholesale approach to say, let's do away with this or that. It's been very laser-like, and only on good reason. That's a good model.
Yeah.
You know, start strict and loosen up as it proves itself.
We've also been great for Jana Moltzin's business model.
Yeah.
Is that just one of the one?
Yeah, it's taken on the bottom, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, you want to take a moment to read this?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So did the new unit essentially come with necessary parking? Is that why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
So
All
no
the
new
parking
construction.
is accounted for on the building, and we still fit within.
Right.
all
Okay.
that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there's no plan for retail at this location?
What's that? No. There's a retail completely separate from my license in that same building. No, correct. AK Joint is the retail that's there. Not my license, though. It's not associated with me.
All right.
Is it the same building or is it the same?
Same strip mall. It's on the same building. Yeah, correct.
This is a little bit off target, I'm sure, but it says there were 168 notices sent to owners and residents within that 500 feet. Is that a typical number? That just seems like a lot.
I got a lot of those back, actually, too. So that's just the list that the municipality sent me.
So is that potentially people that maybe used to live there or rent there or whatever, and they're just no longer?
Potentially, I don't know, but I got a lot. I got
okay.
probably 75% of my notes back.
Okay, that's just okay. Well, I don't know what the answer to that is, but that's just interesting that that many notices go out to potentially that many people.
A lot of business owners.
Just on the backside, there are tons of houses across the railroad track. It's a tight little neighborhood there.
So it could be okay.
Through the chair, Mr. Kennedy, so this is the kind of a map of all the properties that were sent a notice, and it just depends on the size of the lots that surround the petition site, because it's all properties within 500 feet or 50 parcels. So if you're in a more rural part of town, it's just going to be 50-ish parcels that get sent a notice. But if you're in a real compact area of town, it could be 600 notices that get sent out.
Well, it explains it too. The fact I was looking at it as just being an industrial area, but if it was residential being that close, that's probably part of the reason. Thank you.
So wait, the question then, I mean, you got 75% back. What's going on there?
And that's, I didn't count, now I'm just guessing.
Right.
We got
lots.
We got a lot
lots
back.
came back.
We got a lot back.
Yeah, so they are sent to addresses that are on file through property appraisal, so the property records. And sometimes those addresses may be incorrect. They may not be the actual mailing address of the owner. They're just the address that's on file, and that's the best information we have to go off.
But that would be the one used to send their property tax bill and so on. And so it's, well, we need to talk to property, see if they're getting, it just seems odd. I mean, you know, if you own a piece of property, you tend to have a good address as the park.
Yeah.
Huh. Did you put proper postage?
Yeah. I did. I kept them all too. I've got all the letters still. So.
Oh, that might
bring
be
them in for property appraisal. Sure. What would they forward those? Are they? I mean, postcard typically first class. We would forward it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Wow,
they all came returned.
Who just campaigned and would know these things?
Yeah.
Do they forward those?
No, they don't forward those. The
Even if
postcards,
first
they
class?
don't, even if they're first class, they
All
won't
right.
forward. They'll come back. And I did a lot of postcards in this area, and a lot came back as well. It's a high turnover area for residents, residential. I don't know, maybe there's a lot of rentals, so then the owners aren't keeping their current addresses up to date.
Okay, I mean, one from the property people, you know, would be useful, but, you know, what is your public process really? 168 seems like a lot. And in fact, it was 50 or 60 people really got noticed.
Yep.
And the people who, so people who really do matter would never have gotten noticed.
Yep.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Points that distinctly not just property owners but also occupants.
Yep.
That would make sense, I guess. It's scriptures.
So it says property owner or occupant or something on it, or just have a name?
Municipal code does state property owners and residents.
So what does your address say? I mean,
Sometimes it'll just say resident if we don't have a name on file. You can actually take a look at the mailing list. Yeah, sometimes it'll just say resident, sometimes it'll specify the actual owner, if known. So, yeah, sometimes it is rather vague. You know, when you get those things in the mail, it say, you know, John Smith or current resident. That's
interesting. But we've had some cases where applicants have gone through the neighborhoods physically and put kind of campaign style, put flyers on doors in addition to the mail, and just they want to cover everything and talk to everyone. I think that first went out in Bird. Yeah, the signatures from all of his names within 500 feet or something. Said yes, we were.
Proactive.
I don't know that. I mean, you're not required to do that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
definitely over and above, but it's a concern to me. I mean, we're not really doing the public notice that we think we are. That kind of. Okay, any comments on this one?
Well,
Pete?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says resolve the traffic and parking lot layout design. I didn't realize there was a problem. Since you've had to add additional parking spaces, do you have to redesign the
No, that might
parking
have been
lot?
with the retail side. I know the landlord and zoning had some issues where he had to actually paint the lines on the back side of the building. And he did that last year and got the zoning approved and everything. So I don't know if that's.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and Mr. Peterson, I could just specify that condition is based on a comment that we had received from the traffic department that the comment reads, the site plan provided for this application indicates unit MS storage with a parking calculation used for manufacturing. So there's a discrepancy, I guess, in the site plan saying it's used for storage, but the parking calculation is for manufacturing. So that Mr. Traffic Engineer would just like a drawing submitted that is signed by a registered professional, and resolved with traffic by updating parking calculations and providing a site plan for approval for the case file. So there was a previous approval from traffic given for this site, so I don't see any issue holding them up. It's just kind of paperwork issue.
Well, you have to pay some civil engineer $500 to change the street. Look forward to it. Okay, anything else? Thanks, Steve.
That's fine, thanks.
That's recommendation. Yeah, Mr. Constantine. Moving forward for approval.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay. All right, so that's our agenda here. No old business. Audience participation. You came to talk to us, or just did you enjoy that? Learned to enjoy it?
I wasn't sure how the revisions for and I love this meeting, but I wasn't sure how the revisions for Title 10 and Title 10.
I think those are introduced Tuesday, so they're on the regular January introduction. So we'll see what happens with the public hearing on Tuesday, and then where we go forward from there.
But there won't be public
2
hearing.
weeks. Or not, next meeting, 2 weeks from then.
21st, public hearing.
But they're in play if you want to write up comments again. They basically, what you say. Anything else? Public notice for Audience participation.
We moved the meeting.
Oh boy.
No.
There's a camera. Okay, let's see. Now, thank you.
So are we meeting next week again, or when's our next
I'm
meeting?
not aware that we are.
Our next meeting is not until the 16th, I believe.
And just so folks know, I asked Dean to work on a draft of the inhalation onsite consumption set of rules, and I'll just work with him until the committee's ready to have that conversation. So we'll have something that's at least developed by the time we're ready to pick that up.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think?
I haven't set a time with Dean. I sent him a whole slate of things for the next 12 months or 10 months.
Sure, he's working on it too.
Yeah. It's really up to timelines and Dean and that, but soonish, but not super soon. We're going to get through the process of it.
Soonish. What did you say on the second one?
The onsite consumption, second part, phase 2.
Phase 2.
All right, thanks everyone.